I'm Joao Durr. I'm the CEO of the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. I'll be the facilitator of this panel. Okay, so our first panelist, I will ask a question, then you can start interacting with him. First panelist is Corey Geiger. He's the Managing Director of Holstein Association, President of Holstein Association USA, and also a current member of the CDCB Board of Directors. Corey, my question to you is why should we even care in the dairy about sustainability?
Thank you, Joao. And I really want to thank Frank for his presentation. He's a real great scientist and really, quite frankly, an advocate for agriculture to just have common sense science here. But I think one of the things I think about when I hear this, sustainability has so many definitions, and there's a number of dairy farmers out there who still view sustainability with some skepticism. Others even call it gobbledygook, and I can understand the frustration in the countryside. So I ask myself, why does sustainability matter? Why are we talking about it at a genetics meeting? And I thought about this quite a bit, and instead of focusing on sustainability, I want to back up to talk about nutrient management plans. And pulling a little bit from my background, during the summer of 1986, I heard two things on my farm. I was a grade schooler. One of them was, Randy, what the heck are you doing? And the other one was, Randy, what are you doing? Same question, but two different perspectives. My dad, with assistance from USDA, was installing a manure system to hold nutrients for the entire year for our dairy here. This is back in 1986. Not many people were talking about that. The inquisitive farmers kept asking questions. They found manure hauling got a whole lot easier, and my dad had more time and budget in his day. They found out my dad's fertilizer bill got smaller because nutrients were better applied to match crop needs. We also learned that the area's water levels or groundwater got better because the nitrate levels started to drop over time because we were better applying nutrients from the manure, nitrogen specifically. We didn't call it sustainability back then. That word wasn't the buzzword. But when my dad was keeping manure application log books for USDA during that experiment for each seasonal manure application, he was helping our industry take baby steps in the area of sustainability. And that's really what we're doing here. Fast forward 34 years, we continue to make progress. And as Frank talked about, and we heard from our earlier speakers, our genetics are really a big contributor to this as well. But ultimately, why do we have to talk about sustainability? Why is it important? It's because consumers care. And how do they see the issue? Last week at the Dairy Management Inc. annual meeting, Tom Gallagher said sustainability is the price of entry to sell a product. If you're not competing on taste, price, sustainability, or accessibility, then you won't be relative to the next generation. We're talking about millennials and those yet to come. The other thing, this is a Nielsen survey, 81% of global consumers said sustainability is very or extremely important that companies implement programs for the environment. And every one of our farms needs to be thinking about that. And then coming back to the farm here, bringing it back to the farm, Randy Mooney, who's chairman of the National Milk Producers Federation, asked rhetorically, have farmers voted on sustainability? And the truth is, consumers are voting every day. The dairy farm members, the board of directors for National Milk and DMI also voted on the matter, and they've endorsed the U.S. U.S. Dairy Stewardship Commitment Program. And one day each week, all our dairy cows in the United States are producing milk for the U.S. export market. And Tom Vilsack, former USDA secretary for 8 years, pointed out sustainability is just as important globally as it is in the United States. So to answer your question, Joao, consumers care. Since our customers care, that means we as dairy farmers should care about sustainability.
Thank you, Corey. Let me introduce you our second panelist, Lloyd Holterman. He's the chair of the CDCB Producer Advisory Committee and owner of the Rosalind Holstein. And he received a national award in April 2020 for outstanding dairy farm sustainability. Congratulations for that. So my question it's kind of related to that, of course. I mean, your farm received a sustainability award this year. As a producer, what does sustainability mean to you? And how can we in genetics and data help you to be more sustainable?
Well, our journey on sustainability was improving our land, air, and water every day, really conserving resources, making the most efficient use of them, of these resources. Our goal is to produce 1.7 pounds of energy-corrected milk for every 1 pound of dry matter that our milking herd produces. And this has led us to a much healthier cow. And I have to tell you that the net merit formula has been a centerpiece of our program since 1994, when we use that as our sole selection criteria index. And so that's been critically important. We've improved productive life, which indirectly reduced incidences of diseases. That gave us the ability to go 90 months now without antibiotics in our milking. And for a 1,000 cow herd, we think that's pretty good. We're not all the way there yet, of course, a lot of work to do, but this new feed efficiency index is going to increase our sustainability. And I would say that most dairymen views sustainability as something that's going to cost money and take effort. I would argue that sustainability is something that creates more profit. And just, it's a redirection of our thinking. It's a redirection of our genetic programs to select more for health. The building blocks of feed efficiency, besides what you heard today, is going to be health. Healthy animals produce more efficiently than unhealthy animals. Breeding for longer lived cows will reduce culling, which will reduce the need for replacements, which makes your entire operation more feed efficient. So those are the things that we're really focusing on. And my hat's off, the net merit formula breeding for that has improved our feed efficiency from 1.62 to 1.69. And I did a little math on Kristen's cow F at the 880 pounds of feed saved at 12 cents a dry matter pound. That's $100 of lactation. That's nothing to sneeze at. And while we're going to save about $1 a cow is the estimate on $8 million and about 8 million cows, I think there's so much more potential once we get rolling on this. So my hat's off to all the efforts, and sustainability. Genetics is going to be the centerpiece of, and data collection is going to be the challenge. To get good, clean data on farms, we need to, and I think as farms consolidate, I don't see coming to an end, I think the data collection may become more accurate and better.
Well, Lloyd, listening to you is really one of the most rewarding things that we can we can have as geneticists. Thank you for the work you do, and to show that things that we are dedicating our careers to really pay off. So thank you very much for your testimony here. And our third panelist is Juan Tricarico. Juan is the Vice President of Sustainability Research at Dairy Management Incorporated in Illinois, Rosemont, Illinois, so DMI. Juan, my question to you is, how can we use the feed saved evaluations that we are launching now, and other innovations, of course, that's not the only thing, to share the positive sustainability story of U.S. dairy?
Yes, thank you so much, Joao, for the opportunity to be in this panel and for the question. I also want to thank all of the speakers that have come, before this panel. It was great to learn about feed saved and all the work that goes into that. I also want to recognize Frank for all the work that he does. I see, Frank, that you've got the Carla Casta Communicator Award right there behind you on your desk. So he, has been doing a great job in communicating, these topics that are complex, and yet everybody, wants to know about them, and everybody thinks they're simple questions. So, in essence, in a certain sense, feed saved is a much easier and simplistic way to talk about it from the storytelling perspective than if we start talking about feed efficiency. Because most of the people that are outside of our industry just don't necessarily understand those concepts. And whenever they hear the terms genetics or efficiency, they may have certain bad connotations for them. So from the perspective of the trade, being referred to as feed saved, and for the industry to be able to talk, just like Lloyd said, I am able to save $100 per lactation on a cow that is more efficient, does more efficiently use feed, is not only a great aspect of sustainability from the profitability perspective, but it also means that less feed needs to be produced, which means that less crops are going on the ground. That means that less emissions are happening from the cropping side of the operation. So there is definitely, I think, an easier way to talk about this. But here's the deal. A lot of people are looking for silver bullets that are going to solve the sustainability conundrum. And for example, Frank showed how California, in their industry, in that state, is moving forward and the progress they're making. But it's not tied to one single thing, to one single innovation or one single practice. It's actually a combination of all of these practices. So if we take into consideration that genetics has such a central component because it basically determines how the herd of animals is going to look like and what is their capability to transform natural resources into nutritious food that the people can enjoy and consume for the benefit of their health and well-being, that's a great positive story. However, we have to tell it within the frame of the larger story. And science is moving fast. Every day we learn something new. So for example, this GWP star element that Frank discussed is another component of the story that needs to be told in conjunction with the feed saved. So I guess I just want to say that one of the benefits of genetics and feed save, but all of the other traits, and particularly the net merit index, is that being an index, it allows for quantifying the trade-offs and then making decisions on what trade-offs we want. In many of the areas of sustainability, quantifying those trade-offs is so difficult. We just don't have a way to do it, right? But if we take this approach and we apply it, in addition to all of these other approaches that are available, like the GWP star element, plus the feed additives that are being developed, plus other elements of cow comfort, all of that adds to the story, and we can portray the industry in a much better light. That's everything I have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. No, it's not everything you have because we still have the questions to answer. So we have, as far as I could identify so far, 5 questions from the audience, and I will start with Mike Lohaio's question, and he says that many environmental groups don't care about the GHG intensity, but rather they care about absolute emissions. What can we say about absolute CO2 equivalent from the dairy industry? I suspect it may be very different by country, for example, US and India. So Frank, maybe you can address that.
Yeah, so as I said to you in my talk, we went down from 25 to 9 million dairy cows in the United States over the last 70 years. So absolute emissions have gone down, relative emissions have gone down. There's no question about that. Production efficiencies, feed efficiencies have everything to do with both relative emission reductions and absolute emission reductions. I hear the number of 300 million dairy animals in India. That's dairy cows, but also buffalo and so on. 300 million. That's an enormous environmental footprint, and that's a result of individual animals producing dismal amounts of milk, okay? So they have to have 10, 20 times the number of cows to produce the same amount of cow as one of our cows here produce. I mean, whether you look at it relative or absolute, it doesn't really make a big difference. You know, I always use analogies to those people who don't really understand and tell them, listen, a car you drive today versus a car your parents drove or a car your grandparents drove. The car you drive today is way more fuel efficient, and that means you, with all three cars, could drive 100 miles. But today you use half or a third of the gasoline, and that means you have much fewer emissions, relatively and absolute. So,
if I may add on that, I mean, what Frank had just said, I support 100%. In fact, there's a publication that came out here in the Journal of Dairy Science in the last issue that I collaborated with one of the colleagues that Frank has, Ermias Quebrea, and also with Michelle Wattieu from Wisconsin, where we talk about the benefit of sustainable intensification in low-income countries. We didn't talk about India particularly, but other countries like Ethiopia, you know, that has 10 million cows, and so on and so forth, all of them with very small productivity. The idea here is that as population grows, people will need to consume more food, and they will need nutrients to support their life and well-being. So it is important that we continue reducing, you know, intensity. Of course, that the environmentalists are correct in that the total amount of emissions are what determine the warming. But like Frank also explained to us on GWP Star, the benefits that we will get by reducing, you know, methane in the short term are going to be a lot bigger than what we initially thought. So both of those elements need to be top of mind for us, and we can definitely obtain what we're after if there is a concerted effort at a global scale to keep producing food with the best cows.
Another part of sustainability is what do you do with the resources you have? There are countries that all the milk hits the pasteurizer and makes it into the food chain. And in a country like India, quite frankly, half of it never hits a pasteurizer, and how much of that goes waste? And that's part of the sustainable equation here too. We're talking environmental footprint, but what do we do with the things that are created?
Okay, well, Chair O'Malley is thinking that the term sustainability has been misused or overused, or even abused. So do you have a better word for that, or how can we define it properly?
Maybe I might chime in really quickly. I think that people in animal agriculture are way too focused on the term sustainability, okay? Just replace it with stewardship. Would you have a beef with stewardship? If people were to say, I really consider stewardship a very important goal for my farm, would anybody say, no, I have a beef with it? I don't think so. You want to be the best steward of your land, the best steward of the water, the land that you work on, the best steward of the people who work with you, the best steward of the products you produce, and of course, the best steward also of the finances, the financial situation. Now, replace sustainability with stewardship, and I think it might take some of that headache away that you get around using that term. Many of your customers like that term, use that term, and if the Starbucks and McDonald's and Burger Kings in the world like that, then you will be pretty much forced to use it.
That's why the industry goals have been expressed in those terms. We have a stewardship goal, not a sustainability goal.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. That's a very good suggestion. So we have another question here from an anonymous. Frank, is methane emission correlated to fat and protein percent? FAO statistics show that Western Europe is leading in terms of CO2 emissions per cow, not the USA. How does that compare with your earlier statement?
I am not aware of that statistics. I think that we are, we are certainly very close. Western Europe and the US are very close with respect to fat and protein corrected milk and related greenhouse gas emissions, and so I'm not really aware. Maybe Juan, you are aware. I've never heard of that Western Europe produces more fat
No,
protein
Frank,
corrected milk than we do. I don't think so.
I'm having a little bit of
I'll
difficulty
jump
in
there.
understanding the question.
I read a lot of publications from around the world, and this is the first time I've ever seen that quoted here. So I think the anonymous attendee, if you want, why don't you put your source in there and we can do a little investigation on that. But that's a big derivative of not only milk production and fat and protein production, but also what kind of resources are being used. And it would certainly vary country to country, but I think we need a little documentation on that one.
There might be
Go ahead.
There may be a small difference too in the U.S. We tend to feed higher grain diets, which would change the emissions a little bit. I don't know if that's taken into account or not, but I do know that we're able to achieve greater feed efficiency by feeding higher concentrate diets.
And higher concentrate diets.
Cost.
And higher concentrate diets in generally causes less methane because the methane is driven by roughage in the diet. So the more roughage, the relatively more methane you get, even if you do the whole life cycle and include all the grain production and so forth.
I think also another aspect is that it is great if both Western Europe and US are in the bottom of the list, and that means that it confirms the principle that more productive cows, more efficient cows are the ones that are desirable for us to have and counter, let's say, balance the emission problem. So I think it goes in the same direction. We're not in a contest here to know who is the best in the world, but we are both evolving in the same direction. In that sense, selecting for more efficient cows is definitely one of the answers and goes in the direction that we want. So you think this story, like Juan said a little bit about it, how can this industry now tell the story in a way that consumers can pay attention? I mean, I would like to see your reaction also on that.
So as I said, savings is a great way to talk about it because people can relate to savings. It's when we start using some of the lingo, you know, the type of words or terms that we use in the industry that most of the public, but also even people within our own industry, you know, don't necessarily understand if they're a step removed from the farm, you know. So whenever the terms genetics or the terms efficiency pop up, they necessarily don't relate to those. But things such as savings, it's got a universal meaning and it makes sense for people. They can understand, they can follow the logic.
All right. So I thank you very much for your participation. I mean, is there any other question? Oh, there's another question, just one final one here. Many of the areas highlighted for low efficiency in GHG per kilo of milk or meat also have the additional complexities of culture, religion, tradition, and help create those inefficiencies. How do adapt or convey Western advancements so they can be applied in other areas?
I would like to take that question, Joao, because like I said, I think Tyler, Boyd, I encourage you to read that paper that I mentioned on low-income countries. There are definitely elements that in those countries contribute to cows not being as efficient as they could. So see, in many of those countries, the cows themselves, they are the bank, they are the insurance company, they are the source of fuel oil because they burn the dung. There are a lot of incentives, and then there's all the social elements as ceremonies, as, in religious ceremonies and dowries. There are a lot of elements that actually under those types of societies incentivize having more cows. It really doesn't matter if the cow is making milk or not. because it's the head count that matters. Unfortunately, we will not be able to help those individuals in those societies have more efficient cows and more productive cows by just teaching them, all of what we already know about how to get cows to milk better. Because we also, or they also, sorry, need to take care of all of these other aspects that are related to development, to economic development. If they don't have a bank, if they don't have insurance system, if they don't have, those kinds of things, then no matter how much we teach them, they still will use cows, for that purpose. So it's just like I said before, we can't expect one single practice to solve our emissions issue or, address our emissions issue and reduce everything. In this situation, it's the same thing. We can't expect one thing, to just solve the issue of large quantities of unproductive cows in low-income countries.
I just want to say something really quickly too. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is not at all about transplanting US dairy production into India or into African countries. That's not at all what this is about. But it is about allowing those countries that are increasingly more food insecure to at least satisfy the nutritional needs of their populations. And as Juan said, there are many countries where livestock is a social security system, a retirement system. And many of those countries, in many of these countries, girls don't have proper school education. Population is exploding. I mean, literally exploding. In most African countries, human population is doubling every decade. Now think about that for a second. So it's not about us going there and saying, now you do what we have done elsewhere in the developed world, but it is about offering help in developing a veterinary system, a feed system, some genetic improvements and so on, because if we don't, then we will have some real big problems coming up. Because look, I just turned 50. When I was a little boy, we had 3 billion people in the world. Today we have 7.6. By the time I'm an old man, we'll have 9.5. We have tripled human population throughout our lifetimes. And we can offer those food insecure countries in the world to learn some lessons we have learned without acting as colonialists or so, but as partners in overcoming these challenges.
And as I know we want to wrap up, but I did pull up that FAO report, Tackling Climate Change Through Livestock, and it's got a longer name than that. But 2 sentences in there to help answer that earlier question. North America and Western Europe have similar GHG emission totals and have fairly similar levels of protein output. So that is, and the other sentence there was, in North America, emission intensities for chicken, pork, and milk are a little lower than in Western Europe because of the region generally relies on feed with lower emission intensity, which was talked about earlier. So not to pit regions against each other, Western Europe and US have some similarities in that area.
Okay, I would like to thank you, all the panelists. I would like to say that all the questions will be answered individually. And also we will try to combine all the questions into a document of question and answers and publish that in our newsletter so that we don't miss any important questions that have been posed to both panels. And I really thank you very much for your participation. You have been great.